My name is Dana Carlisle. I'm 39 years old, and for 10 years I was the highest performing project lead at a luxury real estate development firm in Miami. I brought in the biggest accounts, managed the most difficult clients, and ran entire teams without a title to match. I didn't complain, I didn't ask for credit. I thought if I worked hard enough they'd eventually recognize me. And then, the promotion opened up. Vice President of Operations. I was the obvious choice, until they gave it to Kyle. Kyle had been there 3 years. I had trained him, reviewed his contracts, covered for him when he missed deadlines, and yet when the announcement came, he got the title. I got the email. Dana, we value your contributions. You're a vital part of the team. But this role requires someone with stronger composure and a less emotionally driven approach. Emotionally driven, that's what they called it. The late nights, the passion, the way I defended my team, the way I made clients feel heard. They called it emotional. And just like that, they shut the door I had spent a decade building toward. I didn't respond, not then, because what they didn't know was that while they were busy underestimating me, I had already positioned myself for something bigger than a title. You see, I had relationships, real ones, not golf course connections or boardroom nods, but trust, contractors, architects, investors, vendors. I was the reason half of our biggest clients renewed. They didn't shake Kyle's hand at closing, they shook mine, but they didn't promote me, because I wasn't one of them. I didn't play the game, so I decided to change the board instead. I quietly updated my consulting license, reached out to a lawyer friend, had the name Carlisle Strategies registered under a holding company. No one at work knew, why would they? I was just emotional Dana. And while they were busy celebrating Kyle's new title with champagne, I was preparing to become the reason their next quarter collapsed. Because they took everything I built and gave it to a man who couldn't even read his own budget sheet. And I wasn't going to fight them, I was going to replace them. I didn't quit, that would have been too easy, and too loud. Instead I did something far more dangerous. I stayed, smiling, silent, watching, because when you've been underestimated long enough, the most powerful thing you can do is make people believe you've accepted your place. They called me loyal, called me a team player, and I let them. Meanwhile I was drawing a map out of the fire they thought I couldn't survive. Kyle walked into the office every morning, like he'd built the place himself. He started forwarding my emails to interns, asking me to streamline his responsibilities. He wanted me to run things behind the scenes, so he could play the polished executive. I didn't push back, I nodded, took notes, and slowly, began collecting everything. Vendor contracts. I made copies, internal strategies, archived them. CRM access, downloaded. Budgets, logged. All of it, the living blueprint of the company I had actually built, was mine in silence now. Not to destroy them, no. This wasn't about revenge. This was about exposure. I wasn't going to tear the house down. I was going to build a better one right across the street. I started quietly contacting clients, not pitching, not poaching, just checking in. Just wanted to say thank you for being such a key part of our last few projects. Most of them didn't even mention Kyle. They talked about how much they trusted me, and that's when I knew they hadn't promoted me because they were afraid of what would happen if I left. But they never imagined I'd stay and rise anyway. Within 6 months, Carlisle Strategies had its first 2 clients, quietly, under NDA, subcontracted through a partner firm so nothing could be traced back, but it was real and it was growing. Every connection they thought belonged to the company had actually belonged to me. And now those connections were watching how I handled myself with quiet power. And the best part, they were too arrogant to notice. Kyle still asked me for help with things he didn't understand. Dana, can you just look this over? Dana, can you help explain this budget model? And every time I smiled and said yes while knowing I was already 6 months ahead of him in every way that counted. They thought denying me a promotion would break me. But it only confirmed what I already knew. I didn't belong under them. I was meant to build something above them. By month 7, the cracks had started to show. Kyle's leadership was a facade. Glossy reports, forced smiles, and missed details swept under slick presentations. But real leadership, that's invisible until it's gone. And once I stopped quietly fixing his mistakes behind the scenes, everything started slipping through. Missed permits, vendors pulling back, investors asking harder questions, and Kyle, he began unraveling under the weight of a title he didn't understand. I watched it all without a word. I still answered his questions, still supported the team, but I gave them exactly what they asked for, not more, not less, no extra glue to hold their broken model together, because this time, I was reserving my energy for something real. Carlisle's strategies was landing more clients, some of the same developers we had worked with before, only now, they were choosing me on their own, not through poaching, through trust. Then, it happened, a longtime client, a massive luxury residential account worth millions, pulled out of a planned renewal with the company. No notice, no warning, just a brief email. We've decided to go in a different direction. I already knew what that direction was. We had signed them 2 weeks earlier at Carlisle, silently, strategically, legally, clean. I hadn't said a word. They had found me. That loss hit like a grenade in the office. Meetings were called, fingers pointed, budgets slashed, and Kyle, he started looking over his shoulder. I could feel it. He was starting to sense what they all were, that the calm woman in the corner was no longer holding up the walls. I wasn't part of the furniture anymore. I was the foundation walking away, brick by brick. It didn't take long before the VP of Finance called me in. "Dana, I know things have felt off lately. We'd love to get your insight on what's going wrong." I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You promoted someone who doesn't understand the business, and now the business is reflecting that choice." She blinked, didn't respond, because deep down she knew I was right. They all did. But I wasn't done yet. I hadn't come this far to make a point. I had come to build a legacy, one client at a time, one move at a time, until the name Carlisle didn't just mean revenge. It meant replacement. By the end of the fiscal year, Kyle was sweating through every meeting. The numbers were slipping fast, deals delayed, invoices unpaid, vendors unresponsive. I didn't sabotage a thing. I didn't have to. Without my quiet corrections, the structure I once upheld with care was crumbling. And in its place, Carlisle's strategies, agile, respected, and fully booked through next quarter. One day Kyle stood outside my office, tapping his pen against the glass like he still had authority. "Dana, got a second?" I nodded. He sat across from me, his voice lower than I'd ever heard it. "I feel like I've lost the room, the clients, even the team." I looked at him and said, with no anger in my voice, "You didn't lose them, Kyle. You never had them. You just thought the title meant they were yours." He left the office in silence. That was the last real conversation we had. 2 weeks later, news broke internally. Another major account, one I had brought in years ago, was walking away. This time, the CEO got involved. Meetings turned hostile. Blame flew like shrapnel. I stayed out of it until they asked me directly, "Dana, do you know why they left?" So I told the truth. "They left because you built your leadership on convenience, not competence, because you rewarded titles, not talent, and now the people who made your success possible are leaving quietly, steadily, just like I did." Their silence in that moment was the sound of a ship hitting the iceberg and realizing there is no lifeboat. The next morning, I handed in my resignation, not with drama, just a single envelope, delivered with a calm smile. "Thank you for everything," I said, and I meant it, because they had taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. When someone refuses to give you a seat at the table, you build your own table, and theirs starts looking cheap by comparison. I walked out of that building for the last time without looking back. The same afternoon, we announced our public relaunch of Carlisle's strategies, full branding, public-facing, a message that said, "We've always been here. Now we're leading." And as the comments flooded in from old clients, former teammates, and even rival firms, I realized something. This wasn't revenge. This was replacement. And the crown they refused to give me. I built my own, and now they're watching it shine. The day after my resignation went public, I received over 50 messages, not sympathy texts, not pity emails. These were opportunities, invitations, congratulations, some from past clients, others from people who'd watched me from the sidelines for years and finally saw me standing in my own light. One message stood out from a senior executive at a firm we had once competed with. "You built that company, they just carried the title." And now the industry was catching up to what I already knew. I was never meant to be an employee. I was always the architect. They just buried my name under someone else's nameplate. Kyle, of course, was spiraling. He tried to call me once. I didn't answer. What would I even say? This is what emotional composure looks like. Instead, I let my silence be the message. He had built a promotion on an illusion. I had built a company on relationships, reputation, and results. And now those results were starting to bleed into their bottom line. Clients who once renewed without question were now asking, "Is Dana still involved?" And when the answer was no, they walked. That's the thing they never understood. Titles don't make leaders, trust does, presence does, and when that's gone, no amount of jargon or press releases can cover the absence. Carlisle's strategies expanded within 3 months. We brought on new consultants, launched a second branch, and partnered with a nonprofit initiative that aligned with our values. I had meetings in high-rises that used to feel out of reach, and now, I walked in as the owner, not the assistant. I didn't have to prove anything, I just had to show up, and they listened. And as for the company I left behind, rumors swirled of layoffs, poor leadership, a toxic restructuring. Kyle's title shrunk from vice president to project manager in a quiet update on the website. No announcement, no farewell email, just a disappearing act, as if no one wanted to admit he had ever been given the keys in the first place. And I wasn't angry, I wasn't gloating, I was thriving, because while they spent years telling me I was too emotional to lead, I had been leading the entire time. With heart, with strategy. And now, with my own name on the door. It's been almost a year now, and I still remember the way they looked at me when they passed me over, like I was a liability, not an asset, like passion was a flaw, like loyalty was weakness. They thought I'd crumble, that I'd stay quietly in my corner, while they handed my legacy to someone who couldn't even spell half the systems I'd built. But they misunderstood me from the beginning. I wasn't there to impress them, I was there to build something that outlived them. Carlyle Strategies is now one of the fastest growing consulting firms in our sector. We've taken clients they once chased. We've been featured in outlets they used to advertise in. And best of all, we've done it without playing dirty. No leaks, no scandals, just undeniable results. And every time I sit in a new boardroom with my team beside me, I remember the conference room where I was once told I was too emotional, and I smile. I don't speak about them anymore, not because I'm afraid, but because they're no longer part of my story. They're the prologue, the warning, the reason I chose to build my own empire instead of begging for a corner in theirs. They were the storm, and I became the architect that rose after it. Kyle? I heard he's gone. Quiet exit, no public announcement, no thank you post, just vanished, like a chapter nobody wanted to finish. But me? I stayed, I rebuilt, I thrived, and now, when I'm invited to speak on leadership panels, I always say the same thing. Don't mistake silence for weakness. And don't confuse emotion with instability. Because sometimes the quiet ones, the ones they overlook, underestimate, and push aside, are the very ones who will replace them. Gracefully, powerfully, permanently. To anyone who's ever been told they're too emotional, too passionate, too intense, too much, let this be your reminder. You are exactly what leadership looks like. And if they won't give you the crown, build your own kingdom, and make them wish they had seen you before it was too late.